Hey everybody, welcome back to this series on doing the hardware swap between the silver computer that's over there and this black system. So in this system it originally had a gigabyte motherboard and an AMD Phenom II Quad 925 CPU and 8 gigs of RAM and the Radeon HD 6770 graphics card, which did remain in this system. The motherboard, CPU, and RAM got swapped over to that system, and the Space Heater FX-8120 ASRock motherboard and 16 gigs of RAM got pulled out of that one and put into this one. The original idea was to help dissipate the heat from that FX-8120 because the silver case just wasn't quite cutting it. Whereas this case here, although I do have some gripes with it, it does have a lot of ventilation. But again, I do have some gripes with it. I mean, when you look at the top of this thing, it's like, okay, you got these fan mounts, but how are you supposed to use them when the motherboard's in the way, or how are you supposed to put a radiator up there? Stuff like that. So if you haven't watched the previous parts of this series, feel free to go have a look. I'll go ahead and put some cards up here in the corner. That way you can go have a look. So this journey has definitely taken some crazy turns. So this black case started out with an all-in-one liquid cooler that was AMD FX branded, and my original intentions were to be able to just drop this motherboard and CPU in there and everything just work. But the problem was that VRM heatsink and fan on the left of the motherboard up there was simply just a tad too high, so that wouldn't work. And it was either open up an all-in-one liquid cooling system and turn it into a custom system, or just build a liquid cooling system from scratch. Because I wasn't going to air cool this thing, considering the part of the purpose of this swap was to give this thing better ventilation and try to make it quieter, because it was super loud in the other system. That FX-8120 though, the issue with it though is I've had some stability problems with it, even when it's not overclocked. And I thought it was the power supply. I swapped out the power supply, and that Corsair CX450 supply came out of the silver system. It's crazy. I didn't have too many issues in the silver system, but I did have some issues with instability with the CPU. I mean, there was the occasional lockup once in a while. And the truth is, I think the CPU is simply burned out from excessive overclocking over time. Because that CPU, for many years in the mid-tower Lux, was overclocked from 3.1 GHz to 4.2 GHz. And the voltage was definitely cranked up quite a bit to keep it there. And as a result, it ran pretty warm, even with the massive water cooling system on the mid-tower Lux. And I think just with time, it just degraded the CPU to a point where it's just not stable anymore. So we're going to try to fix that. We'll know for sure by in this video if it was in fact that FX-8120, because now I have a AMD Phenom II 6-core 1045T. I got this off of eBay as a used pull. I think this was actually an OEM CPU. I don't know if the 1045T was a box cooler, but to my understanding, I think it was likely pulled for an OEM system. These can always be fun. Like for example, there was one CPU I had. It was the AMD Athlon II dual-core 245E, which came out of an all-in-one HP system. Ran on a Plexi for a couple of years or so with a pretty massive overclock. It ran pretty well, but now the Plexi has the AMD Athlon II quad-core. But considering how cheap these Phenom 2s are going on eBay, I just might end up getting one for the Plexi. I don't know. Anyways, first thing we need to do is go ahead and get this CPU out. Oh, I should mention, I did have a little issue with coolant leak on this system. It was around these plastic barbs on this sys cooling pump. I think the barbs were intended for 5/16 inner diameter. I'm using 3/8 tubing, so they didn't get a super tight fit, and the included clamps, metal clamps, just simply did not apply enough pressure. So I added some zip ties there, and also zip tied here to squeeze down this tube really well. And it's been sitting in the closet for what, a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that, and there's no residue of leakage or nothing like that on it. So this is another homebrew water cooling loop, and of course using the this one I used the nylon 1/2-inch PEX fittings as barbs, and they work extremely well. The tubing gets on there really tight. So anyway, we got to tip this thing on its side. Gotta be careful doing that because of course we got the water cooling system in here. Can't do this in mid-tower Lux because otherwise the radiator would just fall off the top of the system. Because I mean it is glued on there, but obviously can't have it on its side. You can see right there the little bubbles there in the coolant. Anyways, we gotta get that water block off there so we can change out the CPU. Tell you what guys, I'm not a fan of the mounting design of this water block. That's probably the only big thing I hated about it. I mean, other than that, it was a decent water block. But the Raystorm Pro CPU block I have in Mid-Tower Lux, the mounting screws they're so much better. They actually bottom out, and you can like for example the springs control the tension. I mean these springs control the tension too, but it's just not a very good design. I'm not a fan of it at all. Try to carefully work this out of the way. So this as a reminder, this again was when the barbs leaked on the sys cooling pump. So we'll see if they seep any again. And of course this is pretty hard on when you're having to move stuff around. Gotta get something to wipe off that CPU with. I know it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing because the tubing's in the way. Just gonna wipe down this processor. Okay, let's go ahead and drop in our Phenom II X6 which they conveniently wrote an ID number on with grease pencil. That's lovely. So I gotta get the triangle lined up before I pull this out and try to set it in there. Alright, now I took this thing out of its original packaging from eBay, or from the eBay seller. The pins do not look bent. Let's see if it goes right in. And it goes right in. Good. I tell you guys, it's one of the things about buying CPUs is when a seller doesn't have the like official AMD plastic containers. Makes me cringe up a little bit when I get that CPU in the mail. Okay, good. The grease pencil just comes right off. Now it's probably for inventory purposes. The little anti-sack bag this was in also had that number on it. A little bit of isopropyl in there as well. And we'll do the same for the block. A little one, a lot. Yeah, that goes. Stuff should dry in a hurry. Okay, so I gotta clean this block off. I know it's off camera. Give me just a moment to get that cleaned off. A little bit of isopropyl on that as well. Go ahead and drop some thermal compound on there. Now let's carefully work this back down. Again, I'm not a fan of this block. Like, if you're not careful, you can indeed over tighten the thing. Okay, so that CPU has been installed. Now it's going to go ahead and start this thing up and see how it goes. See if your air bubble's working the way out. And we got post. Phenom II 6-core 1045T. 2.7 gigahertz. And of course I did put Windows 11 on this thing, even though the system does not meet the Microsoft Elite Class Meal System requirements for Windows 11. And you can see we are in. First thing I need to do is go in and set the proper screen resolution. For some reason it doesn't always detect it. That's more like it. Alrighty. So, I'm not sure if we are even running the proper display drivers yet, because this thing wasn't stable for long. Yeah, we haven't even installed drivers yet. So I'm going to hook this up to the network and let it get drivers. See, that was one of the issues I was having. I mean, I was able to get through installation. Alright, let me take that back. So I got through installation because I installed Windows 11 using the Athlon 2 dual-core CPU. And I swapped back in the FX CPU after I changed out the power supply. Thought everything was all good to go, and then blue screen. Alright, so now we're on the network. So I should be able to go pull up HW monitor. Just crashed again. Temps look fine. Tell you what, guys, this is just a weird one. Alright, so I'm certain it's not our CPU. Maybe our board is going bad. And if the board is going bad, there is a chance that the FX-8120 CPU could still be A-OK. Okay, so even with that CPU swapped, we're still having instability problems, and it seemed that every time Windows reset, well, put it this way, so it got into Windows okay for a little bit, and then it crashed. And then when it restarted, it got almost to the login screen, then blue screen, and reset. And then when it tried again, it got to the second part of the boot animation, and then crashed. And then it was just a boot loop from there. And that tells me it's very likely something's going on with this motherboard. So one thing I've noticed about this motherboard a little while back is when it was in the silver computer, if I modified any of the BIOS settings for the CPU at all, like trying to overclock it even just the slightest bit, or even underclocking it, it would just get really unstable. I don't know if it's a BIOS issue or what, or if it's a hardware issue. I mean, there's a possibility that it could be a hardware issue. I mean, it's crazy. I've been throwing parts of this thing trying to figure out what the problem is. So, well, I just ordered a motherboard for the thing. So, I'm going to throw in a different motherboard that's a socket AM3 Plus board. Therefore, we're going to try to reuse this AMD FX CPU. Try to reuse this, put it back in, see if it runs okay. If it does, great. If it doesn't, then we could use that Phenom II 6-core. So, I mean, this thing has been a nightmare. We've replaced the power supply, we've replaced the CPU, I've tried different RAM configurations, tried different graphics card. It's gotta be the motherboard. I'm telling you, it's gotta be that board. It's gotta be. It was even acting funky in the BIOS, like something was unstable in the BIOS. Temperatures were fine. CPU temp was totally normal. It wasn't overheating or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm thinking it's probably a bad board. I mean, the fact that this motherboard served many years in the Metal Lux running non-stop, and, I mean, carrying that FX-8120 CPU for all that time. So, I mean, kind of hard to say for certain, but I do think we have some instability going on with this thing. So, I mean, I could try to flash the BIOS with instant flash. I think it's got like instant flash or something similar to that in the BIOS. Try to do that through the BIOS. Hopefully it won't lock up while it's doing a BIOS flash and brick itself. But yeah, I mean, I'm seriously thinking this motherboard's done. I mean, I tried to think it was a CPU. Obviously, the CPU was a cheaper option. I mean, I got that Phenom II 6-core for $30. So, hey, the fact is, if the FX-8120 is okay and it was a motherboard, well, gonna have a motherboard in this thing I paid $65 for. So, I've got over $100 in this thing now, including that pump there. So, we shall see. The good news is if the FX-8120 is a good CPU and the motherboard was indeed the culprit, well, we're going to have ourselves a Phenom II 6-core to put in something. Yeah, it could possibly go into QQ Plexi. So yeah, at least something good would come out of it, for sure. But anyways, I was not going to pull the motherboard and CPU back out of the silver computer. I mean, considering I got that silver PC done, and I think I'm going to call it the Metal Lux Junior. So here's a quick look at the motherboard I just bought on eBay. I just bought it a few minutes ago. It's an Asus M5A99X Evo R2.0 socket AM3 Plus motherboard, full ATX motherboard. And what's nice is the socket AM3 Plus board supports the newer AM3 Plus CPUs, but it also is backwards compatible with socket AM3 CPUs. So if it was a case of a double whammy, let's say the FX-8120 processor was indeed bad, as well as that motherboard, I could still drop in that Phenom II 6-core and hopefully have us a good system. So we shall see. Once that arrives and I get some time, I'll drop it in. We'll throw in the FX-8120, see if it runs good and stable. If it does, great. If not, I'll consider other options, probably using that Phenom II 6-core. But hopefully that FX-8120 is good. I could drop it into this motherboard and I'd have that Phenom II 6-core to install on a Plexi. Well everybody, that wraps it up for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to CubeComputer channel, and be sure to tick the bell, that way you get notified of new video posts. Also, I recommend following CubeComputer Company on Facebook. A link is in the video description. In addition to computer tech videos, I have a second channel, CubeCompMTDX. Links are available at the end of this video. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching and your support.